Welcome to our first video on Kenjougo. Hopefully you came here from our videos on Keigo. If you haven't, I recommend watching those first. Because in this video, we're going to move on to another type of Keigo named Kenjougo. We're going to cover what it is, when it's used, and who uses it. And then we're going to look at a few vocabulary terms that are used when we use Kenjougo. So first off, what is Kenjougo? Okay, so Kenjougo, as opposed to Keigo, which we use to talk about other people, is what we're going to use. One of the things we can use, I should say, when we talk about ourselves. But there are two conditions that have to be met for Kenjougo to be appropriate. First is the one I just mentioned. You are speaking about your own actions. But more important than that, and this is what's going to say Kenjougo is better than other forms of Keigo that you could use to talk about yourself, those actions you're talking about have an effect on other people. And those people that are affected are people that you want to show respect to, whether it be a second person or a third person, right? And so now because of this, it's important to note that this is not going to replace everyday words wholesale in the same way that Keigo does, where you're just going to use that when you want to talk respectfully about what another person is doing. This is only going to be used when you're speaking about your own actions and critically that those actions affect someone else, and that's the person that is being shown respect to when you use Kenjougo. So with that being said, let's look at a few Kenjougo words and their usages, which might even be more important than the words themselves in this case. Our first word we're going to cover is a relatively common one, itasu. And itasu is going to mean the same thing as suru, to do, right? So in our first sentence, let's look. 今朝お客様に車内をご案内いたしました. Right. Okay. So there's two things we got to talk about first. First, the meaning. This morning, I gave a tour of the company to a customer, or to a guest. お客様, however you want to translate that, right? So, ご案内いたしました. That's going to have the same basic meaning as ご案内しました. I gave a tour, I did a tour, right? But let's think about it. If you're doing a tour for somebody, they're going to be affected by that action. So even though you're the one doing it, this is a first-person action, it's going to have an effect on this third person. So that's why we're going to use Kenjougo. That's why we're going to use itasu, because that's the person we want to show respect to with this usage. Let's look at another one, and this is certainly an expression that you've heard before. Yoroshiku onegai itashimasu. Right. So we can maybe just cut out yoroshiku for a minute because it's a little difficult to explain. And just look at onegai itashimasu. Onegai means a hope, with o being, again, the respectful prefix. Onegai itashimasu. I am doing a hope, or I am hoping. And again, itashimasu. Why? Because when we say this, it's almost like a nice to meet you, or it's usually translated as, I hope that you'll treat me favorably, or literally, because yoroshiku means favorably, I hope things are favorable, or things go favorably. And so if you're doing that, you're hoping it not just for yourself, but for the other person too. And that's why you're going to want to use itasu in that case, and that's why that expression gets constructed that way. The next verb we're going to look at is mairu, and this is going to have the iku, kuru meaning from the everyday language. Only these verbs of movement. So, the first example sentence, our only example sentence for this one. 事務所まで参りましたが、社長はもういらっしゃいませんでした. Okay. So again, if it's mairu, we know we're the ones doing the going, or at least the speaker is the one doing the going. So, 事務所まで参りましたが, I went to the office, but 社長はもういらっしゃいませんでした. The boss was already not there, or in more idiomatic terms, the boss had already left, right? He wasn't there anymore. So again, mairu, if we're going to the office, and especially if we're going to comment on the shacho not being there, we're probably doing it to go meet him. So if we went to the office to go meet him, we did that for him, it has an effect on him. That's why we're going to use mairu in a case like this. Okay. Another verb, oru. Now this is going to equal iru. And you may have already encountered this because in certain dialects of Japanese, specifically those spoken in the Kansai region around Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, maybe you've met some Japanese speakers from there. They often use oru in the same way that standard Japanese uses iru in everyday language. So if you hear them saying oru, it's not going to have this same respectful Keigo usage. as the standard language oru does. And it's going to function exactly like iru. So just want to note that. But what we're going to focus on here is the Kenjougo usage of oru. So not only does it have the regular iru, to be meaning, for an animate subject, right? It also has the teiru, if you want to construct it as teoru. So this kind of continuative aspect too can be expressed using this verb. So let's look at the first sentence. 田中さんがいらっしゃったとき、私はすでにそこにおりましたよ。Okay. Let's break this into two. 田中さんがいらっしゃったとき, at the time when Tanaka-san came, or more idiomatically, when Tanaka-san got here, 私はすでにそこにおりましたよ. I was already there. And if you're having trouble, そこにいました is going to equal そこにおりました. So, when Tanaka-san got there, I was already there. So, I was there before Tanaka-san. おりました to be. Second sentence. 今メールを送っておりますが、あと20分間で帰ります. So here we're going to see that continuative meaning in 送っております. I am sending, right? So we have 今メールを送っておりますが, right now I'm sending an email, が, but あと20分間で, in 20 minutes, after 20 minutes has passed, 帰ります. I'm going to go home. So right now I'm sending an email, but I'm going to go home in 20 minutes. So again, it's not too difficult to begin to understand these words in context and to use them. The more difficult part is knowing when to use them. And so that's what you really should be focusing on after you've already gotten down the meaning of these different words. Another verb, very simple one. Haiken suru is going to equal miru, to look at, or miru, to watch. It's not written here, but that one too. So an example sentence. 本店で作られたトレーニングのためのビデオを皆さんで拝見しました. Okay. So first off, just basic meaning. Everybody watched a video, a training video that was made at headquarters. Okay, so that makes sense. 本店で作られたトレーニングのためのビデオ, a training video made at headquarters, o, direct object. 皆さんで拝見しました. We watched it all together, or everybody watched it, right? So now, why would we use haiken suru? Which sort of context could make the use of haiken suru warranted in this case? Because remember, if we're using Kenjougo, it has to affect somebody. Who does this affect? It's not really going to affect the people watching it because they're doing the watching. That doesn't have an effect on a person unrelated to that. Who it does have an effect on, perhaps, are the people at Honten, headquarters, who made the video. So imagine that you're talking to somebody from headquarters, maybe visiting your branch, and then you say, oh, we all watched the video you made at headquarters, in a sentence like this. That is why you would want to use Kenjougo in a sentence like this, but only in a situation like that, right? Last verb for this video, 申し上げる. Again, a very simple one. It means you, to say. So in an example sentence, 私は先に申し上げたかったですけど. So, I wanted to say it earlier, but, or I wanted to tell you earlier, but. And remember that you should really be in the translation, because again, if we're 申し上げる and it's Kenjougo, that means we're saying it and it's affecting somebody else, so that would be the person we are speaking to, right? So, 私は先に申し上げたかったんですけど, oh, I wanted to tell you earlier, but. That's going to be a really critical component in deciding whether you want to use 申し上げる or another verb. So in this video, we discussed what is Kenjougo and its two conditions for when we're going to use it. Remember, you're speaking about your own actions, and those actions are going to impact somebody else or have an effect on somebody else that you want to show respect to. And then we covered these 5 verbs that are used in Kenjougo. Itasu, mairu, oru, haiken suru, and moshiageru. In the next video, we're going to review when Kenjougo is used, and we're going to look at more vocabulary words that are characteristic of Kenjougo usage. 今回もよろしくお願いいたします。